SRJC Petaluma campus. How many of you have been here before? Raise your hands. Okay, for those of you who haven't, this is one of the jewels and hidden secrets that we're going to try to unsecret to the community. It's a 250 person theater. Every Wednesday nights during the semester we have films here and it's open to the public. It's part of a film class that we teach and we welcome you. And you know, Santa Rosa Junior College has been providing education, like I said, for 100 years. And for the next 100 years, we're really moving forward with a lot of investments in our infrastructure. Our Santa Rosa campus is getting really, really worn, and we're building a new theater there to modernize the 80-year-old Luther Burbank Theater, so that'll be completed in July. We're also beginning a science building here, a science wing, where we can teach more lab classes, and also we're going to redo our Student Services Center. So there's a lot of exciting things going on here in the JC and the district. At this time, I'd like to welcome Paul Heavenridge, who's the master behind the scenes with LiteracyWorks. This is a program that SRJC and LiteracyWorks, we partner together. Lynn Woolsey, who's my neighbor, called me one day and said, I have this program, I want you to see if you want to partner with us. And if anybody knows Lynn Woolsey, you can't say no to her, you know. So that's where we have this partnership. So at this time, please join me in welcoming Paul Heavenridge. Thank you.
Well, as you know, I'm Paul Heavenridge. I'm the Executive Director of LiteracyWorks, and thank you for coming out and being part of this wonderful In Conversation With, the last of our speaker series for 2018. But as you see in your program, we have some great people coming in 2019. We're really getting a great lecture series together at that time. So our lecture series is in collaboration with Copperfield's Books, and it supports, it's a fundraiser. This is a fundraiser. It supports our programs, particularly LiteracyWorks Center, which works with underserved, low literacy, low income individuals to help them get into and stay in the community college here at SRJC. And I just have to say we're really proud. We're on our 4th year. We have a success rate of over 90% of staying in college. And now we even actually have, yes, due to our great staff and our wonderful students. I mean, it's amazing the barriers that they overcome to be successful. And now we have some students that are actually graduating, going to 4-year colleges. So that's amazing. We have Sonoma State, we have, and Chris maybe will talk a little bit more about that. So it's very important. We receive our funding through these fundraisers, these lectures. And so if anything you can help out with, we appreciate it. There's my pitch. All the information is on the program. It's literacyworks.org. I also want to thank our partner in this lecture series, our other partners, which are our board, of course, and friends of the LiteracyWorks Center, and the staff that work so hard. I especially want to express our heartfelt gratitude to Congresswoman Lee for donating her time today, and to Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey for moderating the conversation. So a few housekeeping notes. We'll take the questions at 3:20. We're a little tight. Congresswoman Lee has another event to be at back in Oakland. She drove all the way up here just for us. That was great, yay. And yay, that's good. Okay. And so we'll take questions at 3:20. We'll get through as many as we can. There'll be some book signings over here, as you see on the left. And please mute your cell phones, okay? And just real quick, we have our lectures. Be sure to go to our website, literacyworks.org. And now I'd like to introduce our LiteracyWorks Center Director, Chris Schultz. And he'll introduce one of our students.
Thank you for coming today. We really appreciate your support, and I know the event will be worthwhile. It's my privilege to serve as the director of LiteracyWorks Center. We have 100 students approximately that, as Paul pointed out, they succeed at a disproportionately high level for students who are otherwise at risk. we've honed a program that increasingly gets us into the lives of these students, many of whom can't afford time or money to be a full-time student. They're often parents, single parents working 2 jobs. And we provide financial support as well as advising and perhaps even the beginnings of an educational community within the wonderful resources of Santa Rosa JC. Our students each have a unique story. And Rita, our fellow staff member, and I have met with all 100 students individually in the course of the last 6 months. And what we've found are extraordinary barriers, incredible optimism, belief in the future, and education is part of it. Literacy is a matter of social justice. You can't raise your life up without the ability to read and write. Now, much to my pleasure, we have a student who started out in ESL, and he informed me at our event last week that he wasn't going to be able to stay in the program anymore because he's graduating. Lorenzo, would you stand up, please? If we had more time, this man is a stand-up comedian. He is very funny. But the student that we will have speak today is got a very rich story and 2 very sweet daughters and her husband right here. Diana?
Hello, everyone. Perseverance is the best quality a person fosters because we know that by working hard, a hope becomes a reality. Hello, my name is Diana Angel. I'm 20 years old, and I'm mom of 2 beautiful girls, Lucero and Esmeralda. I can say that being mom, it's not been easy, but gives me the strength to stay focused in my journey. I have always loved helping people and being involved in my community. I knew that if I want to help others and at the same time being a role model for my daughters, I need to go back to school and finish my education. When I came to the US, I had an experience of wanting to buy an ice cream on a hot day in June, but I couldn't do it because I didn't speak English. That day, I promised myself that one day I will speak English and I will be productive in my community. In fall 2013, my adventure began at Santa Rosa Junior College. And I'm proud to say that I'm a student at this excellent institution. I registered for a school with a strong feeling of determination to complete my education. I started English as a second language. I was placed in intermediate level, which means I will have a long road ahead of me. After being ESL student for 2 years, I earned my certificate of accomplishment. Right away, I complete English 1A. And after that, I started taking science classes that are required for the nursing program. At the present time, I'm finishing Anatomy 1 and Food and Nutrition 62. And for the following semester, I'm enrolled in microbiology, sociology, and political science. I will be able to apply to the nursing program at the end of the fall 2019. My hope to work as a pediatric nurse is becoming a reality. Through these years, being a mom and full-time student has not been easy at all. In fact, sometimes it's difficult to get to the end of the month. However, I'm determined to not give up. I consider myself very fortunate, and I could not be where I am right now if not were for the support of amazing organizations like LiteracyWorks. You have been my support through these last 3 years and a half. During this time, I have embraced you as part of my family, and I'm thankful for this support and friendship. My daughters and I are very grateful to all the people who support this cause because LiteracyWorks is a key to the success of many SRJC students. Thank you.
I've been asked to introduce 2 board members. I'm not sure what they're going to do.
Hi, I'm Wendy.
And I'm Bonnie. Wasn't that a wonderful story Deanna just shared with us?
And we've been involved with Literacy Works Center for several years because this very successful program helps so many people like Deanna.
So of course, running a program like this requires funding, and you're all contributing by being here today. Thank you so much.
And we know you'll want to contribute more. Open your hearts, your wallets, take out those 20s. We have a lot of expenses for this program that means so much to so many people who lack the opportunity to get an education.
We'll be passing these hats to make it easier for you to help us out.
And we'll also be collecting questions for our 2 amazing Congresswoman speakers.
So we're counting on you. Please contribute and help us continue to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for your very inspiring words. And now it's my honor to introduce the top of the ticket. Barbara Lee is somebody who has followed in my career. When I worked in Oakland, after finishing at UC Berkeley, I worked as a social worker in Asian Community Mental Health Services. And I came upon somebody who worked at Ron Dellum's office. Her name was Barbara Lee, and she started off as an intern, and she ended up being the chief of staff. Barbara's career has really taken off, but it's through a lot of hard work where she was a staff member, and then she ran for the assembly, was elected, was on the state senate, and then owned a small business successfully in Oakland, and then later ran for the Congress. You know, Barbara Lee is really, when you think about the word social justice, that's Barbara Lee. She was the only vote after 9/11 to vote against having military intervention in the Middle East. Only vote. And that's real leadership, because that's real moral leadership. I think she learned that from Ron Dellum's. And then when I was appointed to work in Washington, D.C. in the Obama administration, I ran into Barbara and her staff, and they really extended themselves to me. Because when you come from the West Coast to the East Coast, it's a whole different ballgame. So it's really Barbara and people like Lynn Woolsey who made it my time in D.C. really meaningful. And now, being president of the JC and having an opportunity to introduce this woman who's now going to be in the leadership of the Democratic leadership is, to me, you know, really, really gratifying because she really worked in the trenches selflessly, and she has worked her way up to a leadership position. And today she's going to tell you who our next president's going to be. She's going to tell you who's going to go down in the whole Mueller investigation. She's going to tell you all that stuff, and she's going to be asked by our own Lynn Woolsey. So please join me and give a Sonoma County welcome to Barbara Lee, the Honorable Congresswoman Barbara Lee. You're the best. You're the best. Okay. Kill him.
Hi, girlfriend.
Miss you.
Well, they say they do, but how could they? They've got you. I want to tell all of you a little story so you'll know why Barbara and I are such good friends. And it would be very dull for me to start asking her the questions that she and I agree on everything, because we agree pretty much. So my constituents would come up to me when I was still in office and tell me this idea they had. And I'd say, if I hadn't been thinking about it, I'd say, well, I'll think about it. I'll get back to you. Well, Barbara Lee's going to do it. And so I found out that they'd go, not them, but the other part of the same group, only the East Bay part, would go over to Barbara and say, blah, 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 we want to do this, it's such a good idea. And she'd say, well, I'm thinking about it, and I'll let you know. Well, Lynn Woolsey's doing it. So we learned how to get together before we made decisions on the things that we were both being lobbied about. Now, I can tell you, as a retired member of Congress, I know my constituents love me, but you don't know how many times I heard, we love her, but we wish she was Barbara Lee. So why don't you tell us, Frank talked about your vote and being the only member of Congress to stand up for something that you knew was true. Many of us knew within days that we'd made a big mistake by not voting with you. But tell us what you're made of that would make that possible, Barbara.
First, I'm so happy to be here with you, my sister.
Thank you.
You know, in Congress, we call everyone our friends, my friend, but Lynn is really my friend. And Lynn, let me just say, I miss you so much. Probably one of the most profound absences that I feel the void is on Monday or Tuesday morning, seeing you at the airport, going to Pete's Coffee and catching up from the weekend and figuring out how we're going to plot the next week.
Is that right?
And that's what we did every day for a long time. And so it's really good to be here, good to be with LiteracyWorks, and good to see everybody. I always say my district is the most progressive and enlightened congressional district in the country. Lynn always said hers was the most progressive and most enlightened congressional district. So I think we're kind of sisters and sister district. Well, you remember that day. I mean, this was, 9/11 was a tragic, horrific, fearful day. I was actually sitting, I'm giving you this backdrop to walk you to how I got to where I got. I was sitting in the Capitol that morning. It was early, Lynn, and I was with then Diane Watson and probably 5 other members at 8 a.m. meeting with the administrator of the Small Business Administration. Very few people were in the Capitol, and we heard the Capitol Police all of a sudden, probably maybe 8:15, 8:30, say evacuate, get out, get out. And so we ran out, didn't know which way to go, and no one knew what was going on. There were, again, very few members around at that early. And so I just started running, and I took my shoes off and ran down Pennsylvania Avenue, and the police just said, keep running, keep running. And I looked in back of me. I looked over my shoulder, and I saw all of this smoke. And later we learned that was the flight that had gone into the Pentagon and killed so many people. And I kept running. Remember Dennis Moore?
Yes.
Dennis caught up with me, and we ran to his house. And then we watched what was taking place in shock and dismay, and we were traumatized and stunned, just like everyone else. Fast forward, learned that my chief of staff, Sandre Swanson, his cousin was Wanda Green. She was on Flight 93. And that was the flight that was coming in to the Capitol, we know now.
Yes.
And so for me, the tragedy was very personal. The loss was very intense because, one, we had lost so many people in New York and in Washington and in Pennsylvania through an attack that we had no idea what was taking place. But then also Wanda was killed in Flight 93 in a plane that probably, and I always think about those on Flight 93 because they more than likely saved my life because they took that plane down before it got to the Capitol where I was. And so we had our briefings. Lynn and I went to all of the briefings, intelligence briefings, the armed services briefings, all of the the discussions we had. And finally, we decided we had to come up with a response, naturally, an appropriate response, I thought. And so a resolution was crafted, and it was so broad, it was like overly broad than the one that was finally voted on, that most members said, no, we can't vote for this. We sent it back, and Lynn spoke up in caucus, I spoke up, and others spoke up and said, look, you know, we've got to be careful, we've got to, you know, have an appropriate response, because yes, we've got to do what we need to do. We've got to bring the terrorists to justice. But remember now, this is just a day later. And so finally, the resolution came back as it was, and there was no way to amend it or change it. And what this resolution said, in essence, it was 60 words, and it said the president is authorized to use force against any nation, individual, or organization he believes is connected to 9/11 or associated with 9/11. Now this was it was 60 words really, and it was that broad. And I said, wait a minute. And I said to the caucus again, this could be used any place, anywhere, for any length of time, with no end in sight. I mean, who are we going after? First of all, well, we believe, you know, it's Al-Qaeda, but we don't know yet, but we've got to do something. And quite naturally, revenge and anger and wanting to do something was in everyone's mind. And so I was struggling with it, quite frankly. I said, you know, because I knew the rest of the country was where every member of Congress found themselves, and that's, we've got to do something. And the anger, naturally, and I know you were angry and fearful, was overwhelming. And I started thinking, I said, but you know, the public elects members of Congress to be rational, to think through an approach and a response, because they elected us. They don't expect us always to go with the flow. And so I thought about that, and you know, and then others started saying, yes, 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 but we've got to be unified with the president. Don't make this partisan. I said, this is not partisan for me. It's something that I believe, and my dad was a retired lieutenant colonel, and so I'm not going to send our troops into harm's way without knowing the costs and consequences. Finally, as I'm thinking about this, I went to the memorial service that evening. Did you go, Lynn, to the church? Okay, the National Cathedral. And it was, I wasn't going because I wanted to stay on the Hill to think it through, but I was in the cloakroom with Elijah Cummings drinking, I'll never forget this, a ginger ale. And at the last minute, I said, nah, Elijah, I think I'm going to go. And I ran down the steps. I was the last one on the bus. It was a rainy, overcast day. I got on that bus with my ginger ale. I went to the memorial, and the comments and the remarks by most of the electeds, including President Bush, they were kind of like a drumbeat of war kind of speech. I said, this is a memorial. We're supposed to be remembering those and praying for those who pray, or just, you know, meditating on what took place. It was unbelievable. Then Nathan Baxter, who was he was the head of the National Cathedral, he gave his really eloquent obituary, his remarks, and in it he said, as we act, let us not become the evil who we deplore. I wrote that on the program, and at that moment I was resolved. I said, come hell or high water, I am not going to vote for this because I know what the consequences are going to be. So I went back to the Hill and told my staff I had decided that I was going to vote no, and of course everyone's like, oh my God. Please, don't you know this is not good? You're going to lose your seat. They're going to come after you. You don't even know the comments I got. I said, that's okay. There come those moments in life when you have to do what you think is right based on your conscience and based on the Constitution. And so the vote was called. I don't know if you remember this. It was supposed to be Saturday. It was called instead on Friday. And was on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and that was the committee of jurisdiction that this resolution was supposed to come through, even though it didn't come through for a hearing. And so that meant I got 2 or 3 minutes on the floor. I'll be quick. So I wrote a speech really quick because they said, you better get down to the floor if you're going to say anything. So I did, and I wrote it out. I called Ron, I called my pastor, and I told them, look, you know, you guys let the chips fall where they may. And so I went down and I did what I had to do. And then I voted no, and I was very calm about it. And I went back into the cloakroom. And then that's when Lynn came back, I'll never forget, and Nancy came back, and friends of mine came back and asked me, do you know what you just did? Yes. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes. I
You're the
remember
only
someone
one.
said, Barbara, you're doing so much great work on HIV and AIDS and on poverty, and don't you know you're going to lose your election? I said, well, I'm going to work to win, but what can I say? This was the right vote. So bottom line is, by the time I got back to my office, my dad was the first one to call me, to tell me, you did the right thing, Barbara. He was the first one to call. Lieutenant Colonel Garvin said, he called me, he said, you did the right thing. There's no way Congress should authorize the use of force in this way forever. And now we've set the stage for, or that resolution. 41 times it's been used in a declassified report in 18 countries, and it continues to be used in Yemen, Somalia, Guantanamo, you just name it. And they go right to that authorization of 2001, say we have the legal authority to do this. And so fast forward, I'm trying to repeal it.
Yay.
And I did repeal it in the Appropriations Committee last year. Democrats and Republicans voted to repeal it. And guess what? Before it got to the floor, out of the committee, Paul Ryan just took it out of the appropriations bill to show you how undemocratic and how sleazy these people can be. So anyway, that's what happened. And Lynn, it's been a hard time being the only one, but it's been wonderful to see how the public began to understand it very quickly, and how it took 18 years for both Democrats and Republicans to finally understand that this was a blank check that should have never been passed. And so, you know, we have to just keep working. Sometimes this is a marathon, but we have to do what's right.
Well, we knew, some of us, within 2 days, 2 minutes, that we made the wrong vote. And everything you had, you begged me to do the right thing. And I'm sorry I didn't. Mostly I'm sorry because if a few of us other Democrats, the other Democrats who should have voted with you, would have, you not have gotten all of that hate dumped on you. That's what I didn't like.
But Lynn, I wouldn't want anybody else to have any of that hate
Yeah, but we would have thinned it out.
dumped on them.
We would have gotten our share. I mean, it would not all have been one person. I'm sorry about that.
But Lynn,
Yeah.
let me tell you though, when I talked with you about it, I mean, Lynn had tears in her eyes, and you told me you had talked to your family, your kids, and they were really upset about this. And there was no way that we could let this happen without doing something. But that's what I understood, because it was so hard for people. I mean, members of Congress are human too, you know, and so that's what takes over sometimes is the human side, and the congressional side maybe is diminished a little bit during those kind of moments of trauma.
So that's who we have here, a real hero. Working to repeal and still going forward. So what are you doing now, Barbara? What are the two most important things that are on your plate, or three, if that's what you need?
Wow, a lot is on my plate,
I
but a
know.
lot is on our Democratic caucus plate also.
Yes.
One is, okay, I'll give you our Democratic caucus plate.
Well, before you do that, you have to know that Barbara is the first African-American woman to be elected to leadership in the Congress of the United States.
But I just have to say, Lynn, that's since 1789, right? No, really, that's since 1789. And also, when I was elected in 1998, I was the 20th, only the 20th Black woman ever elected to Congress. Now, that kind of says to you where this country has been and where we're going. Not fast enough for me.
Or anybody.
Not fast enough.
Yeah.
So, of course, we won. Thank you very much, all of those who helped us win. Lynn and all of you, big time. And so now we have so many new members who are very young, multiracial, diverse, who are coming to Congress. They're all very authentic. They're coming to Congress ready to do the work. The majority of them are progressive, and they want to get the work done like now. And I don't want reality to set in too quickly because this process does move a little slow, but because they're so energetic and eager, I think we're going to do a lot of work in the next 2 years. One is reducing the cost of prescription drugs. We've got to do that and protect the Affordable Care Act. I mean, we must do that before we move forward and do anything on health care. Of course, you know where I am on Medicare for all and single payer, but we've got to make sure that we solidify and make good on the Affordable Care Act. Secondly, we're going to introduce H.R. 1, which is our reform package, campaign finance reform, okay? Got to get money out of politics.
Yes.
Voting rights. We've got to reinstitute our voting rights, voter suppression. I mean, stuff is bad all over the country in terms of our democracy. And so really and cleaning up the corruption, of course, in Washington, D.C., especially with this Trump administration. So that's H.R. 1. That'll be rolled out probably January 3rd, January 4th. And then, of course, the bill to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We're working on a real infrastructure bill that presents the public with infrastructure in its broadest sense, like broadband, infrastructure, meaning teachers and, creating better schools, a better educational system as part of our infrastructure plan, as well as the brick and mortar for infrastructure. One of the issues is how we're going to pay for it and finance it. We need a lot of money to do that, and we'll find the money. They can find $750 billion for defense. They darn sure can find enough for infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're not suggesting that we pay to drive down our freeways?
No way. No way.
That we pay individually?
No. Even when I was in the legislature on toll fees for down south, I always voted no. Yeah. No. And the other thing we've got to do is figure out a strategy as it relates to economic growth to raise wages and to make sure that workers are not working 2 and 3 jobs making poverty wages. Okay? So that's our overall Democratic agenda. Now, Barbara Lee's agenda, okay, is that and some.
Yeah.
One is I want the Democratic caucus to begin to take on the issue of inequality and poverty in a bigger way than we have done that. Because when you look at what's taking place in terms of racial and economic inequality, first, unfortunately, it's a unifier because people who live in rural communities and suburban communities and urban communities all are struggling if they're not making a lot of money. And so what I want to do is, following up with Reverend Barbara, we had a hearing with Reverend Barbara, who's got an overall agenda on poverty elimination and 12 bills that we know will help cut poverty in half in 10 years. And so what I want to do is make sure that Democrats embrace the Reverend Barbara moral agenda and move forward and have hearings around the country to talk about economic and racial inequality. So that's going to be one of Barbara Lee's initiatives. And secondly, I want to make sure that we have people and members of Congress at the table who reflect the country and who have different points of views on every issue, foreign policy and domestic policy. And so part of steering and policy's job and part of my job is to make sure that committee assignments are given to those who want to do, members want certain committee assignments, and we have to make sure that those assignments are balanced and reflect different points of views. And I think it's about time we have on foreign policy and domestic policy more progressive points of views. And the Progressive Caucus, Lynn, I want you to know, we negotiated 40% of all the committees as Progressive Caucus members. So we've got that going.
She tells you that because we co-chaired the Progressive Caucus 4 years, and then I had 2 more years with another member, and we grew from under 20 people to over 88.
Yeah, now we have probably 90, everyone wants to join the Progressive
Sure.
Caucus now. I mean, I think 25 of our members who we endorsed won.
Oh,
And
that's
so
good.
we have a Progressive PAC. We now have, you've got to come back to this, a Progressive Caucus Center, which is not affiliated with the Progressive Caucus, but it's a 501c3 or C4, which is going to provide, similar to what the Democratic Study Group used to do, a lot of policy analysis, a lot of outside kind of information, and will kind of drive the policy agenda for the Progressive Caucus. So the Progressive Caucus has grown in depth and width, and we're very diverse, and we finally have more people of color involved. You know, one thing, yeah, clap for that, because Lynn and I got to tell you, one thing Lynn and I, we struggled with the Progressive Caucus, because every time we showed up, it was, nobody looked like me. And remember, we had our first big planning session, retreat. And Lynn, remember, we were sitting up there, and I looked out there. I said, Lynn, here I'm co-chairing this Progressive Caucus with you, and I see one African-American, 0 Latinos, and 0 Asian Pacific Americans. I said, this is crazy. And so we worked. Lynn, I tell you, worked really hard. I worked really hard to make sure that we would never have a Progressive Caucus that looked like
progressive.
So that's part of it too.
Yeah, right. So before we get questions from the audience, let's talk about what's coming up in 2020.
We've got a lot of great candidates running, that's for sure. And I'm not going to say which one
I'm not asking you that.
because I really don't know.
No.
But I think they're really, they're all, I think, good candidates. But I think what's important is that we get the DNC to have a 50-state strategy and to do what we did like in the South with Stacey Abrams and with all of these candidates who almost won.
Yes.
And have a robust field operation going, a civic engagement operation going like now. I mean, we can't wait until next year, until year after next.
No.
You know, we've got to start building. And I think that, well, I know we're going to win, but we have to have that grassroots mobilization early on so that at the last minute, you don't ask me or Barbara Lee to go into a black church on the Sunday before election. You've got to, yeah, that's what they do, you know.
Yes.
You've got to start building in communities of color and talking to millennials like, why do we want you registered as a Democrat? You know, why this party values you? Why your life would be worse and can be better if we elect Democrat, a good progressive Democrat to the White House. So we've got a lot of work to do because so many people are excited about the elections, but yet they don't take that next step because they don't think their vote's going to count. And so I think this last time we saw, and I was in, let me tell you, I went, Lynn, and why I'm sharing this is because I know we can do this. I went to, during the last 3 weeks of the election, I'd done this before, but during the last 3 weeks, New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania. Now, these were like for 3 or 4 candidates in each state. Pennsylvania, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada. I was down in Orange County. I mean, you just name it. But everywhere I went, I said, you really want me to come to Orange County? Mike Levin said, yeah. I went down and 1 mile from where Richard Nixon's house was in San Clemente, I walked into this event that Mike asked me to attend, and I thought I was in Petaluma. And people really were excited that I was there and wanted to hear, you know, what we had in mind and wanted to work together. And I mean, so I see a lot of hope out there. Things are changing, but we have to embrace that excitement and change and energy and not let it die and not let people see us as Democrats doing things the same old way.
Right.
Okay, and I know Lynn always push that envelope. Got to get out of the box now, right?
So how do you see the Democrats bringing the diversity and the new Democrats into the fold besides waiting for their turn through seniority?
You mean on the Hill?
On the Hill.
Yeah. Well, you know, seniority, first of all, to Nancy's credit, she, in the last few years, has created new positions such as vice chairs of committees, for example, and leadership positions for new members. And there are a variety of vehicles now, infrastructure, in terms of our rules that really do allow for new members to fully participate. I'm not going to say I want to get rid of the seniority system, and I'm going to tell you why. Because now, when, as a black woman, okay,
Yes.
see, African Americans and people of color can't waver on seniority. Because first of all, we work hard. We play by the rules. The Voting Rights Act, I mean, I remember when, you know, my grandfather couldn't vote, the poll tax, right? So we've been in the trenches waiting for this day. We've done everything they've asked us to do. And then you get to a point where you can chair a committee and they're gonna say no, because seniority doesn't count anymore. So you can't do that. You have to have some balance. And as a person, as a member of the Black Caucus, I mean, we've taken a really strong position on seniority. And it's not like we're trying to stop anybody from moving ahead. We've got to create more opportunities for newer members to do what they want to do and to strengthen our caucus. But you just can't say we want committee chairs to be term limited. I mean, can you imagine Maxine Waters now is going to chair the Financial Services Committee? I mean, you know, I don't think I want her termed out. Eddie Bernice Johnson is going to chair the Science and Technology Committee. You know, I mean, we've got Bobby Scott is going to chair Ed and
My
Labor,
committee.
Lynn's committee. And so you've got some phenomenal people who have been there and working hard for this day. And then to tell them they'll be termed out? Come on.
Not even in 4 years?
No, Lynn. Look, let me tell you, elections are the best term limits
That's
in the
it.
world.
That's what I think.
You know, if your colleagues say no, they don't want you, or your constituents, then you're termed out, okay?
Uh-huh.
But don't create no rules that are gonna change my
Okay,
path
well,
or anybody's
out in the
path.
public, I don't know about you guys, I'm reading that that's happening, so it's just a suggestion.
It's a suggestion. I'm gonna vote
Okay.
against it.
Well, good, I know you will. And the Black Caucus will.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
Before we have questions, which will be pretty soon, how are you handling Donald Trump? Well, without touching him.
No. Look, I am staying very focused on what we have to do, first of all,
Oh,
okay? Everyone knows that this administration is corrupt and they've got to go. And sooner or later, they will. And so the investigations that are going to take place now under our watch, the Mueller investigation, the New York investigations, all the criminal investigations, I mean, so that's going to take care of itself. I think what's important is, and again, coming at it from my history as an African-American woman who was raised in Texas, in El Paso, you don't let anything stop you from moving forward, you know, because you just can't do that. I've seen such ugliness and meanness and the racism and the sexism and the ageism and the everything. And if we focused on trying to figure out how not to let him get us down, we would be, you know, I mean, to let us get down, we'd be in bad shape. So I think for me personally, I just keep talking about my agenda, what I'm going to do, keep fighting and hope we win some battles, which I think we will, and keep working toward 2020. I mean, that's what it's about, 2020. And if whatever happens in the meantime is just icing on the cake.
yeah. You mentioned our friend Maxine Waters. How about, tell the story of our triad.
Oh, yes.
Are
Well,
there any triads like it yes, left?
no,
Anybody?
I think, though, the new members who are coming in, especially the new members of color, are beginning to form a gang.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to have a gang.
But Lynn, myself, and Maxine, you know, Lynn was the one who led the effort to bring our troops out of Iraq, and on her vote, got 133 votes, or
Yeah.
132 votes. And so we formed the Out of Iraq Caucus. And we were at a press conference one day, and it was Lynn, myself, and Maxine. I remember we talked about what are we going to call it, and how are we going to bring more members in. And we actually sat in Maxine's office and plotted this. And I don't think Nancy was too happy because we about what we did, but we did it anyway. And so we were at a press conference, and a reporter asked some question about it, who we were or what we were doing. And Lynn, off the top of her head, just said, "We're the Triad." And then we were known as the Triad from there on. Still, we're the Triad.
And we knew we'd made it when many months later, we didn't make it because the war is not over quite yet, but we made it as the Triad because I was in a scrum of reporters out in the speaker's lobby. That's what we call them, scrums. And it wasn't about the war. It was about I think it was about something else anyway. And one of the reporters said, "Well, what does the Triad think of this?" And another reporter said, "Triad, what do you mean?" And the entire group in unison said, "Woolsey, Waters, and Lee, don't you know?" I knew we'd made it.
So it's institutionalized, the Triad.
Yeah, we have.
In history.
That very moment.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So do we have questions? Let's go. All right. So what are we supposed to, he's coming down here. What are we supposed to do getting ready for 2020? Are we supposed
to organize, really. Lynn, I am telling you. It's and making sure the Democrats understand that we can't be wishy-washy, that we've got to speak truth to power. We know where the country's going, and the majority of the country has caught up with progressives. It's mainstream now, $15 living wage, right? That's Progressive Caucus got out there on that years ago. Now, I mean, the whole country's talking about, $15 and more, naturally, for a living wage. Medicare for all, all of the issues, no privatizing of education. The entire agenda of the Progressive Caucus has become mainstream. And so I think we have to tell our party, stay where we are. Do not go to the right, because I don't think we'll win if we do.
Are you asking?
All right, you answered all the questions. So. I like this one. You can't answer this, but I like it anyway. It says, "What the hell is going on? And how do we make it better?" So that's a general. When will the Democratic Party go back to representing working people again?
Right.
This is for both of you. Yeah.
It's going in that direction, I think. And I think part of what you see, though, it may not be, our messaging is getting better. But when you look at what the Democratic Party and Democrats have stood for, I mean, the voting record is there in terms of voting for working men and women on trade issues, on environmental issues, on education, on a living wage, on worker protections, on our union, our right to organize, because, the union busting is taking place everywhere. So when people ask that, I'm saying it's up to us to communicate what we've done, because we're still doing that. Democrats have not balked on standing up for working men and women, but it's kind of somehow we've missed being able to tell the story, I think. So it's up to us to be a little bit more vocal and figure out how to make sure people know what we stand for, and that we're going to do more. I mean, this whole issue around inequality and poverty, and I mean, when you're looking at fighting for working men and women, you have healthcare workers who are making maybe $10 an hour who are eligible for Section 8, and because Section 8 vouchers are being cut, they can't even get a decent place to live, right? So, I mean, we're fighting for those who are at the low end of the income ladder.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that was a good one. Let's see. Congresswoman Lee, can you touch upon the Green New Deal and how you stand on the issue? And that was several questions here. So
Well, I support it. I signed up for it. I'm proud of that. And bottom line is, I think central to that is fossil fuel. We got to get rid of fossil fuels and no more donations from the fossil fuel industry. And so I think it's a really good plan in terms of in terms of our environmental protections, and in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of fossil fuels, in terms of the economy becoming a green economy. I don't know. The details of it have got to be fleshed out, but I know that a select committee is going to be established, and
Yeah.
the jurisdiction has got to be worked out, because we have some really great chairs who are going to work on this also. So we're coordinating all of that now, but I think it's something we all should learn about and support.
That's great. And there was a number of questions as kind of a follow-up to this. Is can you tell us what you'd like to do to keep what you do to keep your spirits up? And they refer to your sparkly cap.
Oh, my God. Well, I listen to music, and I water my plants, and I hear from my grandkids all the time. Simone texts me 8 times today.
Oh.
Yeah, I have 5 wonderful grandkids. 2 are in Bloomington, Illinois. Jonah is at Howard now in D.C. So when he's hungry, he calls me, and we go out to dinner in D.C. And then my other 2 grandkids are in Southern California. And so that's what I do. And I go to church and say my prayers.
That's good. Okay.
Wait a
This
minute.
is-
Wait a minute. I have to add
Oh, yes,
something
go
to
ahead.
that. Barbara, you're something of an artist also.
Oh, yes.
I mean, she has an eye for design and art it's insurpassable. So,
You know, if I had it to do over again, I'd probably be an architect
Yeah,
or
there you go.
or a
See?
designer. I love color. I love painting. I love art. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's my hobby, really. That's what I do when I shut the doors. But yeah, thanks, Lynn, because I really, I played music. I won all these music scholarships when I graduated from high school. I used to play concert piano, but I haven't even touched my piano in 30 years. But so I love music. One day I'll get back to playing. So I have that artsy side of me that keeps my spirit going.
Yep.
And I think that's important for anyone who's doing this hard work. Lynn knows. Yeah.
Well, this is written for Congresswoman Woolsey, but I think both of you could answer this also. Do you think the recent attacks on the ACA can provide an opportunity for Democrats to pass universal health care?
yes.
Okay.
But I think first we have to do what Barbara said, is make sure we keep ACA intact so we can go forward. We can't lose it. I have to tell you, we were very supportive of Barbara and myself adding the
Public option.
public
Oh
option.
my God, we fought. like
Oh, we
crazy.
fought so hard for that, and we were in the president's office and out. And
I have that
Woolsey,
picture, Lynn.
Woolsey, what do you want today? Kind of thing, and that's our nice President Obama. He didn't,
But we were in the office, and they
But
knew
we
they
were
needed our
there.
votes.
We were
They
at
knew they
that
needed our
table.
votes.
Yes. If we, honest, when it was all over, I think if we had we couldn't at that time because we educated people in doing so. But we educated people so that now we're ready for health care for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
We don't go back to that
don't go
as
back.
our step.
Yeah, and we did actually put into the bill, I mean, this was not that big of a deal, but it was given where we were, that states have the option to enact single payer.
Yes.
And the
Yes, they
feds
did.
would allow for that and give the waivers to do that. So we, in doing our negotiations, we formed a quad caucus. It was the Progressive Caucus, the Black Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, Asian Pacific American Caucus. And all of us came up with our principles of what we wanted to see in a universal healthcare package. And we probably got about, 60% of it. We didn't get the public option or a single payer, but we got expansion of community clinics, expansion of Medicaid. We got some really a lot of the health equity on racial and health disparities. We got that in. So we were able to hang together. That was over 100 votes. And we went into the White House several times and talked to President Obama. And you remember that conference call we had with him that August? And they were worried that we were going to, and we let them know that, you know, we have to get something out of this. So otherwise the votes just weren't going to be there.
I have a quick question myself. So why was it so difficult to call it Medicare for all? Being that Medicare is universally loved, and it seemed like it would have been easier to get more acceptance for that.
Well, they referred to, for example, they'd say universal health care, for example, Medicare for all, but there was never a commitment because that would be committing to universal health care and single payer. I mean, yeah.
Well, now we have a Medicare for All caucus, and there are about 70 members of that caucus.
Good.
So that's
Okay.
progress.
That's big, that's big.
Okay, good. So this is for Congresswoman Lee. Please briefly talk about the role Shirley Chisholm has had and continues to have on you. And you've mentioned
glad.
before, but
Shirley Chisholm. I got involved in politics as a result of Shirley Chisholm coming to Mills College in '72. She was the first woman ever elected to Congress was Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. Now, I had a class in government, and I was a requirement was to work in one of the campaigns, McGovern, Muskie, Humphrey, whoever was running during that. I told my professor, Dr. Mullins, flunk me. I'm not working in these guys' campaigns. They don't speak to the issues I care about, flunk me. You go flunk a class? Yeah, flunk me. So at the same time,
That's who she is.
but I was president of Black Student Union, and so we had a little budget for speakers. So I invited the first woman elected to Congress, Shirley Chisholm, to come to the campus, to Mills College. She came, and during her speech, she said she was running for president. And I said, really? I had no idea. So I went up and talked to her afterwards. And she said, look, little girl, now mind you, I was in my early 20s, 2 little kids, the whole bit. She called me little girl up until she died. She said, you have got to register to vote. You've got to get involved. She said, if you really believe in what you say, and you know, then I was a community worker with the Black Panther Party. I was on welfare. I was raising my 2 kids and a community activist on a bunch of stuff. And I was still getting B's and A's in class. And so I was really busy. And so I said, yeah, but I don't think this is for me. You know, I want to be on the outside pushing. I'm an activist. I'm a revolutionary. I want to be part of the change from the outside. She said, no, but you've got to get on the inside. You've got to register to vote. You've got to get political. So I went back and told my professor, maybe I'll consider passing this class now. I said, what do I do? How do I do it? She said, that's up to you to figure out. And actually, I asked Shirley that, and she said, that's for you to figure out. I don't have a lot of national money. So my professor said, I don't know, you figure it out if you want to pass the class. So what happened was I ended up talking to Sandy Gaines and Sandra Swanson, who was head of the student body at Laney. Sandy was student body president at Mills. We actually organized the Shirley Chisholm Northern California campaign out of my class at Mills College. I registered to vote. I got an A in the class, and I went on to Miami as a Shirley Chisholm delegate. Yeah. But she became a mentor and a friend, and I tell you, I love Shirley. When I worked for Ron, who I miss, who passed away July 30th, I tell you, this man was a bit larger than life. But I was working for Ron, and I would watch Shirley, and she would tell me, she was on the Rules Committee for a while, the first African-American on the rules, first, I think maybe the second woman. And so she was having a hard time, you know, dealing with all of the guys and all the racism and sexism, just like we're still dealing with. And just, she was amazing. And so when I ran for the Assembly, Senate, and Congress, she came out here, and she actually helped me win. She walked precincts, she did phone banking, she did so much because she believed in me. And I, since she passed away, I did legislation for the Shirley Chisholm stamp. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's a beautiful historical stamp. We've done all kinds of resolutions honoring her. We're naming post offices after Shirley Chisholm, and we're trying to keep her legacy alive. Finally, let me just say, she was elected on November 5th, 50 years ago, and that was the day before our election. So on November 5th, several of us through the DNC hosted get out to vote rallies and events on November 5th in preparation for November 6th in Shirley Chisholm's honor and in her memory.
Right.
So it was great. That's why we won.
And you have her portrait.
Oh, that's
hanging
right,
in-
Lynn. See, this is when, yeah, and you know, we had to fight to get her portrait hung in the Capitol. First, a commitment to get it done. It was like really a fight. Finally, we won that. And I think Nancy was speaker, and that's how we won it. Okay, and having a woman as speaker really makes a difference. So we finally got the okay to do it. But then, guess what? They were gonna hang it in a really dark corner, way away from, no one could see it. And we raised Cain about that. Had to go back, show you how hard you have to fight. It's not only on the outside, but it's in Congress. You have to fight like crazies. And you have to be vigilant. And so when I said, no, this can't happen. So I went back, and Lorraine and the speaker, we went through it. And finally, we got a prominent place for her portrait, which is between, as you walk through the corridor between the House and the Senate, there Shirley Chisholm is. And everyone sees
And it's
it.
just wonderful.
Thank you, Lynn.
Looking down at you
Oh,
like
yes,
that.
the artist was really beautiful.
Okay, last question. A lot of great questions. Sorry we didn't get to all of them, but Congresswoman Lee does need to leave by 4:15, and she's graciously offered to sign her wonderful biography over here. So we want to get her out of here by 4:15.
The books are for sale down there.
They're down there. Okay, so last question. First, thank you for being the voice of reason against war. Thank you, you and Lynn. What, if any, backlash did you experience because of that? I know you mentioned a few things. Yeah.
Well, mainly the backlash had to do with actual death threats and really bad stuff like that. But also, it generated an opponent in my election, my re-election campaign, and the campaign was so horrible because of how she portrayed me. And I'll give you one example. Her website had a picture of me smiling with the World Trade Towers burning in backup. She went to New York and marched with Rudy Giuliani, and I think it was the Veterans Day Parade, with a picture of me and the World Trade Towers and me smiling. And so that went on throughout the entire campaign. It was really bad. And then being called, now you don't ever want to be called a traitor and committing acts of treason. And so many people, you know, called me that. And that is the worst thing in the world to be called. But yet on the other hand, let me tell you, and I have 60,000 emails and notes that I've given to Mills College. I'd say about 50% of them are thank you, Barbara Lee. Bishop Tutu, Coretta Scott King. I mean, you know, there was so much understanding out there in the world. People from all around the world, from India, wrote to me and said, we get it, we understand it. And the mean stuff is there too. And I wanted the mean stuff to be there because I want a social psychologist to analyze what was on people's minds and how they think during that time. Because what I learned was that a lot of people, a lot of Americans don't really understand that the right to dissent is a main part, a central part of our democracy. They think if you say something that's not the status quo, or if you go against the grain, that you're committing an act of treason and that you're unpatriotic and that you're committing acts of treason and you're showing that you're an un-American citizen. And I mean, it's just crazy stuff. And so that's what the feedback and the fallout was for me, was to see there's some pretty sick people in this country who really either don't get it, don't want to get it, and don't know what democracy is all about. But yet there's some others in the world who really get it, and that's what kept me going.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's give a big hand for Barbara and Lynn.
Thank you, guys.
Hey.
That was fun.
Books down there.
Whoops.